Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Artsbeat TV and radio here on Westfield Community Programming Channel 15, 89.5 FM WSKB, and our new media partner, Southwick Community Programming and Amherst Media. We were going to call today's hour the Tony Awards show because the Tony Award nominations were going to be out the day we taped. But the Tony Awards committee decided to postpone the announcement of the nominations for 1 week so that people, because of COVID and performance cancellations, the nominators could get to see everything that was eligible to be nominated. So in this case, I decided to keep the same guests that I have, and let's turn the Tony Awards show into the Broadway show. My first guest this morning is Paul Marte. Now, for many years, Paul had been on Artsbeat talking about the Bushnell and its Broadway series, where he had been for many years as the public relations person, and prior to that, Hartford Stage. But while we all went through the pandemic, Paul left Hartford and moved to, of all places, Broadway. And he is now working in marketing, and the show that he is currently representing is the revival Take Me Out on Broadway with Jesse Tyler Ferguson. And Paul, it is great to see you.
It's great to see you too. It's great to be back on Artsbeat.
Yeah, it is. And you've just come through a triumphant recovery here. How are you hobbling around these days?
Well, I just had a hip replacement on Tuesday, so I'm literally hobbling around on my walker, which is underneath the standing desk right now. So I'm taking a couple weeks off of work, but I didn't want to miss this. So it's a great chance to do a little something and chat about Broadway.
Well, not only that, but the next time we see each other with all the metal that I have in my legs, we can go through metal detectors and watch the lights go out.
It's going to be quite something, quite a little event.
Yeah. So, Paul, you made this during the pandemic. You made this big transition from the Bushnell to Broadway. How did that happen?
Well, it as with most arts organizations, the Bushnell sort of hung on to as many people as they could at the beginning, and then some of us got furloughed. And I actually spent most of pandemic time up in Maine. And then when they sort of decided to do some sort of reorganization at the Bushnell, they essentially got rid of everybody that had been in marketing. And so I found myself without a job. And so I was looking around and didn't know if I'd be back in the arts, knew I'd be in some kind of marketing, public relations, communications of some sort. And this job became available at Second Stage Theater here in New York, and I applied for it and had a few interviews and ended up being offered the job, and that was last September, and that's how I ended up full-time back in New York. So I was certainly looking all around New England for something. I was looking in sort of any kind of industry that had communications, and was actually really surprised to end up back in the arts, back in theater, and very surprised to land on Broadway, but hey, I'm not complaining.
Yeah, it must be exciting for you, though, to walk down 44th or 45th Street and go, wow, I work here.
It is. Our office is actually on, the address is 1501 Broadway, but it's on the corner of 7th Avenue and 43rd Street, and our Broadway theater, the Hayes, is on 44th Street. So I have to go over to the Hayes pretty frequently. And it's usually a little afternoon trip I will take just as the lights are becoming more visible in Times Square. And so I'm rounding the corner into Times Square and I'm seeing all these lights. Like I truly cannot believe I'm here working on Broadway. And then you zip over to the Hayes and you go in and here you are in a Broadway house and I'm working there. So it's quite the thrill, and I appreciate it every day.
So you work for a nonprofit theater company that produces theater in the commercial theater in New York. What are some of the shows? I mean, Take Me Out is your current show, but you do a regular season of different performances and productions, right?
Yeah. You know, as with every theater, that things at Second Stage were a little disrupted with the pandemic. And so we have an off-Broadway theater, the Tony Kaiser Theater, which is down 43rd Street, which is a great little theater. There's an off Broadway theater, the McGinn-Kazala Theater, which is uptown. And I don't think they have produced at the uptown spot since like 2016, 2017. So we're going back to producing 2 new shows up there this summer. And then we have the Broadway house, the Helen Hayes Theater on 44th Street. And I think Take Me Out is the 6th show that Second Stage has done since they've owned the Hayes. The first one I did when I first started was Clyde's, the Lynn Nottage play with Zoe Duba and Ron Cephas Jones. And that opened last November to enormous critical acclaim, but still right in the middle of COVID. So it found an audience, but not as big an audience as we would have liked based on how well it was doing in terms of the critics and how well audiences liked it. But it was a terrific show. And then we were doing, when I first started, they were already had in production the first off-Broadway show of the season, Letters of Suresh, at the Tony Kaiser Theater. And then the second off-Broadway show that they did in tandem, and they don't usually do things at exactly the same time, but director schedules worked out. Stephen Brackett, who's directing A Strange Loop, was also directing To My Girls, our off-Broadway play this spring at the Tony Kaiser. So we had to mesh schedules together a little bit, and ended up having 2 shows at the same time. So we had To My Girls down the street at the Tony Kaiser, and then we had Take Me Out around the corner at the Hayes. So there's a lot going on. To My Girls closed a couple weeks ago, and we extended Take Me Out until June 11th.
Wow. Yeah, and I would assume that when the nominations come out for Tony Awards next week, that Take Me Out will probably be nominated for multiple awards, along with Clyde's.
Yeah, we're kind of expecting that we'll get a nomination for Best Revival. And it's funny, when this airs, we'll know all this. So we'll either seem like we are precognizant talking about this, or we don't know what we're talking about at all. But it would not surprise me if Clyde is nominated for Best New Play and Take Me Out for Best Revival. And there could be several performance nominations and some director nominations in there too.
For all the years that you worked on Broadway at the Bushnell, and before that on regional theater with Hartford Stage, well, at least at the Bushnell, by the time the show got to Hartford, it had been produced. It had been already was proven as a hit in New York. Otherwise, Hartford would not have taken it. And here you are producing new work that has not been seen before. It must be a completely different opportunity and experience for you doing Take Me Out as it is like bringing a tour on a stage at a Hartford.
Yeah, it is actually much more reminiscent of what I used to do at Hartford Stage, where you would be doing something from the ground up, and kind of when you were beginning it, you didn't know what it was going to be. And that certainly was the experience with Clyde, which was a brand new show. Less so with Take Me Out because it's a revival, but still it was a brand new cast. It was 20 years later. New director bringing new things to it. And it was a show that had been in rehearsal for a couple of weeks before the pandemic hit. And to reassemble the entire cast 2 years later was amazing to do. But you get a sense of what that show's going to be based on what it was before and how it did before. So that's a little different than doing something from scratch like we did with Clyde, but it's still brand new work. And you still get all the excitement of building the set and putting that in and welcoming audiences in the whole preview period and seeing how it's shaped during previews. That's certainly something you don't see when you're working in touring theater on the road. The show really does not have a preview period. Occasionally there's a night it comes in before critics see it, but it's all been produced, it's been done. They've worked out all the kinks, usually in New York or previously on the road. But here it's fun to see how shows are shaped from, we usually see the final dress rehearsal and then opening night, and then we see it another time during the run after everything is frozen. So yeah, that's a fun process to watch.
And has your role changed? At the Bushnell, you were doing the public relations and schlepping the stars to their TV appearances and being nice to people like me that were reporters walking in the door. What is your role at Second Stage?
It's very different from that because in New York, and this is most theaters work this way in New York. We have a public relations firm, Polk, that handles public relations, and they're the ones that schlep the actors to interviews and set all those up. We have an advertising firm, AKA, that makes all the ad buys and does all that placement, which is another thing that I did at the Bushnell. So my job is basically working on projects that make the marketing happen at second stage. So it is making sure that all the advertising gets routed to everybody that needs to see it. A lot of the signage that we do, the front of house stuff, that everything that you see outside the theater, all that signage needs to be designed and put up and run through multiple people that give thumbs up or thumbs down or changes. So it's a lot more trafficking. It's its own, in its own way, very much like working at an agency where I'm trafficking things around all day rather than trafficking actors to and from interviews.
Yeah. Now, it must be nice, though, living in a community where you can go see a play every night of the week.
That is one of the definitely perks of the job is I rarely pay for theater. And I get to see a lot of things. And it's a huge advantage to just, oh, this is available tonight. And, you know, they're offering tickets. And so just leave work and you go see a show.
Yeah. As we move into Tony Award season, what are some of the things you've seen since you got back to New York that had an impact on you one way or the other?
I would say one of the shows that had an enormous amount of impact on me, and I like this kind of reaction to a show because when I came out of it, I wasn't quite sure how I felt about it. And the more I sort of have sat with the show, the more I've liked it, and I can't wait to go back and see it again, is The Minutes by Tracy Letts. It is just, I would say for the first 3/4 of the show, it's going in one direction, and you're like, oh, this is an interesting sort of comedy about all these different personalities at a meeting, a community board meeting. And then it turns into something quite different. And I don't want to give anything away, any spoilers, but what happens is it deepens and sort of, it changes enormously and gives you a lot to think about when you leave the theater. So that is a show that has sat with me and I can't wait to see it again. And I will say, not to diss anybody, but a show that had sort of the opposite effect on me was POTUS, that recently opened, which is a comedy, and it's fun, but it's so lighthearted that it's one that as I get further away from it, seems lighter and lighter and lighter to me, and it's like not something I would run back to, but it's a fun evening at the theater. The other show that has continued to sort of sit with me, and I got to see it twice, is just absolutely amazing, powerful, was the revival of Caroline or Change. And that was a roundabout production last fall, and it was just astonishing performances from just about everybody in the show, and the show itself is amazing. So I wish it were still running, but certainly should be in the running for Best Revival of a Musical when nominations are announced next week, and would not surprise me if it wins.
Yeah, I've heard really great things about it. I've only seen 2 of the nominated shows for Best Revival of a Musical, one being Company, and the other day while you were in surgery having your hip done, I went to see Funny Girl, but I won't say much about it.
Okay. I loved Company. I saw that too, and just absolutely loved Company. So another one, I'd actually, grown up on the original cast recording, and had never seen the show until I saw it on Broadway. And the show is it's not that it's different than the cast recording, but it's obviously a much fuller product than the cast recording. So it was interesting to finally see the show.
Yeah, I mean, I find Company was one of the first shows I ever saw. And to go back and see it, it was at Barrington Stage in the Berkshires a couple of years ago, not revamped with the title character being a woman as opposed to a man. But boy, it's a show that holds up over the years. It's just a wonderful, wonderful piece of musical theater.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and Patty LuPone was amazing. Everything,
totally amazing.
Everything you wanted her to be in it. I did not go into the show as a huge Patty LuPone worshiper, and she's absolutely wonderful. And I thought, oh, this is kind of a small role until you get to her part toward the end, and it is transcendent. Her performance is absolutely magical. So I was thrilled to see that.
So what was the transition like moving from Hartford to New York City?
It was a long transition because it was that whole 16 months of COVID where I was up in Maine most of that time. So we split our time, my partner and I, mostly between Maine, and we would come to New York occasionally. It's his apartment here in New York, and I would go down to Hartford occasionally. And then when we decided, and I got the job in New York, that we would make this our home base, had to sell my place in Hartford and transition down. So it wasn't instantaneous. And I had lived in New York before I moved back to Hartford 20 plus years ago. I had lived in New York for 10 years. So it's not unfamiliar to me. And I've been coming here for 5 years to visit my partner. So it was very comfortable doing it, but it's still, these life transitions are, they take a lot out of you emotionally, and just packing everything up and sorting things out and creating a new life together. It's been quite a year of transformation.
And is in your eyes and in your daily routine, is New York reopened? I was in New York on Wednesday, and the theaters were packed. The theater district was full. The restaurants were full. People did wear masks in the theater, but it seemed to me like pretty much the New York that I knew and had lived in and everything else.
Yeah, it's a little different from when I was here before. I would say the Midtown tourist part of it, and happily for us for theater, that has come back. And I would say that's been just in the past month that I've seen that come back. What I find kind of nice is it's comfortable to ride the subway now because the commuters are not back. The people that are coming in from areas outside the city or are commuting from areas within the city. A lot of people are still working at home multiple days a week, coming into the office only a couple days a week. So riding the subway to me is much more pleasurable than it was 15, 20 years ago. But definitely in terms of restaurants and packed theaters, Midtown very much feels it's back in terms of people coming to visit.
Yeah, and in terms of the theater, like Take Me Out, are people going to the theater? Are the theaters doing well?
Yes. Especially for sort of known quantities. I mean, you saw Funny Girl. It's near impossible to get a ticket to Music Man. You can get tickets to most shows. But the popular shows are tough to get tickets to, and you'll go and you'll be in fairly full theaters. We've had number of sold out performances for Take Me Out, and I think if we do well with the Tony nominations, we'll even have more sellouts.
Okay, Paul, we're going to take a quick break to acknowledge the underwriters that make Artsbeat possible. We're chatting with Paul Marte, who took a big leap in the last year from Hartford and the Bushnell to actually working on Broadway. So we'll talk more about Broadway when we come back. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. I'm Mark Auerbach. Don't go away.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by Westfield Bank. For more than 160 years, Westfield Bank has been an important community presence and commercial leader in the Pioneer Valley. With convenient full banking services in Westfield, West Springfield, East Longmeadow, Agawam, Feeding Hills, Springfield, Southwick, as well as Enfield and Granby, Connecticut, visit us on the web at westfieldbank.org.
Hi, this is Harry Rock, host of Rock on Westfield every fourth Wednesday at 8 a.m. Tune in for my view of this place I call home.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Artsbeat, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. If you've missed a part of today's programming or you want to watch it again or share it with your friends, it's archived at WSKB Community Radio's YouTube page. Our guest this morning on the first half hour is Paul Marte, who is at the Second Stage Theater on Broadway in New York. He used to be at the Bushnell and before that Hartford Stage. And while all of us were sheltering in place during the pandemic, he made this big move to New York City. So, Paul, you lived in New York like 20 years ago, and now you're back. What is it about New York and the theater world there that is exciting that you had no idea was there when you lived in New York the first time?
Well, I think when I lived in New York the first time, I wasn't working in theater. I was working in publishing. So I was not connected at all to the world of theater, other than occasionally going to see a show. So now I'm so connected to the world of theater in terms of the people that I work with are always going to things. We're constantly talking about theater. It is it's been a very, very busy year. So I've been at work a lot. So I've been far more immersed in theater than I ever have been in my life, which has been a lot of fun. And it's interesting to work with people who have the same degree of love of theater and interest in it and can't get enough of it that I've had in my life. So it's been very gratifying to be able to come back and no matter what happens, I will always be able to say I worked on Broadway and I've been having a great time.
Yeah, you went all the way from regional theater to producing house to Broadway, which is incredible. Mm-hmm. Have you discovered new parts of the city that you never knew existed just in your wandering around?
Not really yet, because it's been busy. And if you've lived in the city, you kind of get used to your little areas. And I live in Hell's Kitchen up near Lincoln Center, and I work in Times Square, and I walk to work every day. So I'm super familiar with the area between 58th Street and 43rd Street, especially 8th and 9th Avenues. And I've walked them, and I love seeing new things that are happening there. But I don't explore other areas of the city yet as much as I would like to. But hopefully now that I have my new hip this summer, I'll be able to get out and do a lot more. And when I lived here before, I lived on the Upper East Side and worked near Grand Central. So that was sort of, my world was between 86th Street and 42nd on the East Side. And you become very familiar with that. So I have not been able to explore a lot of things as much as I would like, but I do love the little theaters in Greenwich Village. Those are fun to go down to, Soho Playhouse and Cherry Lane Theater and those down in those little off Broadway houses down there. Some great things there.
Well, I was so glad to go back to New York the other day, and I had lived in Hell's Kitchen when I lived in the city, and I was so glad that the Poseidon Bakery, which has the best baklava in the entire world, still exists on 8th Avenue and between 45th and 46th.
I'm going to have to go.
Yeah, the Poseidon. Great cherry and apricot strudels. When I was commuting to Springfield and living in New York the first time, people would give me orders to come. Would you bring up 2 cherry strudels or 2 of this and 2 of that? And I would do a Poseidon stop, and then I would do a Zabar stop before I, made the trek north. And I gained weight eating half those strudels on the train, going back and forth. If you were going to predict some of the Tony Award nominees for Outstanding Play and Musical this year, what are some of the things that you think will be nominated?
I would bet for play, we'll probably see Clyde. I think we'll see The Minutes. I think we'll see, I wish I had the list of the 12 eligible in front of me. I could probably pick them out. We've been playing this game for a while. What else might be? I don't know, in terms of best musicals, I think that the real horse race is going to be among the revivals. And as I said, I think Caroline or Change has a really good shot there, but Company may have a shot as well. In terms of the new musicals, Strange Loop is getting just a lot of great press and a lot of great feedback. I have not seen that myself, but that's one of the next shows that I want to see. I'm one of the people who actually saw Diana the musical and liked it. I don't think it's going to get nominated for anything, but I think that the dislike that people had for that show was all out of proportion of what it actually was. It actually had some really charming music in it, and was visually pretty interesting, and it's some neat performances, but it just got savaged by the critics. But I enjoyed it when I saw it. I saw that earlier this year. Let's see, what else have I seen that I really like? I just saw an off-Broadway show, won't be eligible for the Tonys, called Just for Us. And it is now moving on to its third off-Broadway theater, and it was just picked up to go to Williamstown Theater Festival this summer. So if you get a chance to see that, it's a really remarkable one-man show, and I would highly recommend that. So we'll see. I'm super excited about the Tony nominations next Monday, and by the time this airs, we'll know all about who's nominated, and probably not who won yet. I think we won't know that until June. But
we won't know that. By the time we find that out, you'll be walking uninhibited you'll have to come. You'll have to on one of. I know that you have a Maine getaway in a gunkwit, and one of these weekends this summer when you guys leave town to come back to Maine, we'll have to meet up for coffee. You can make something north of Hartford. You're halfway. Get out of the car, stretch, and have a coffee stop. Fantastic. What do you think of what you've seen? You probably see at least as much as I do. I did not go to New York at all this year, actually, other than to see Funny Girl, and that was a fluke. I really don't know. This one play, Hangman, that many people have seen, it seems to be fast-tracked to being the best play, and Strange Loop, I would assume, will be nominated for Best Musical. And I think of a revival of a musical, either Caroline or Change Your Company are likely. In terms of performances, I have no idea. I mean, it's just very hard to predict.
Yep.
But
the lead in Caroline or Change was just amazing.
Yes, and she's coming back to New York in Death of a Salesman next season.
Yeah.
So when Take Me Out closes, what's your next project?
Our next project is our two Uptown shows. They're brand new shows with new playwrights. One's called Patience and one's called 53% Of. So those are the two things that we'll be working on this summer, but they're much smaller projects. And then the next big show for the fall is the revival of Between Riverside and Crazy. That'll be at the Hayes Theater this fall. And our other shows for next season have not been announced yet. We have two of them that we know and two more that we don't know. So look for announcements on stuff from Second Stage Theater in the coming weeks.
So if people wanted to learn more about Second Stage Theater, how do they find out what's going on?
Easy. Our website is 2st.com.
Okay. We've been chatting with Paul Marte. Paul, it is always good to see you. Thanks for joining us, and I'm glad you're on the way to a quick recovery here.
Thanks. Me too. Thanks for having me.
Okay. We're going to take a break to acknowledge our underwriters, and we'll be back with more Artsbeat, so don't go away.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Dunkin' Donuts shops of Westfield and the Sardinia family. It's nice to know that even as the world changes, Dunkin' Coffee remains the same at 7 convenient locations throughout Westfield. Underwriting for Community Radio on WSKB is brought to you in part by Rockies. Over 30 convenient locations throughout Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Connecticut, and Florida. One of the nation's largest ACE dealers. Expertise and great product selection in paint, hardware, lawn and garden. That's Rockies. Rock solid service since 1926. On the web at rockies.com.
Join us the third Wednesday of every month with Selectman Joe Didi and his take on everything Southwick.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB.
Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Artsbeat, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. Today we were going to be talking about the Tony Awards. However, the nominations were postponed a week, so because some of the performances were canceled due to COVID, they wanted to give the nominators an extra week to see shows. So on our taping date today, we really can't talk about the nominees and who we think is going to be best this or that, but we can still talk about Broadway. And Tim Leininger, who is a theater reporter for the Journal Inquirer in Connecticut, who also has this phenomenal podcast series called One Man's Opinion. Tim has seen just about everything there is to see in New York and Connecticut. We run into each other at opening nights. I'm a fervent follower of his blog because I don't get to New York that often. So it's always great to have Tim on the Artsbeat. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. How's it going, Mark?
It's going well. So I know that you've seen just about every show that opened in New York this year.
Yes, I've seen everything but Mr. Saturday Night, who I was supposed to see last night, but Billy Crystal was sick and they canceled my my invite at the last minute.
So when will you get a chance to go see that?
I'm not sure yet. We haven't rescheduled, and rescheduling sometimes takes a week or two to lock in, since the theaters were not planning on having seats blocked out for press before then, during those later dates.
Yeah. But I mean, I was supposed to cover a show tonight at TheaterWorks in Hartford, which got canceled because of COVID. I mean, it's just part of the game these days, you know. I sort of take it in stride. I have a Friday night now that I can do what I want. So
yeah, no, I'm going to have an early Mother's Day celebration with my fiance's mom. So.
Yeah. So you've seen just about everything. As we head towards nominations, looking back over the course of a season, are there any plays and musicals that had a major impact on you in retrospect that you think should be acknowledged with an award in one way or another?
Yes, and I've been thinking about this since we scheduled this, and the hard reality is that what I've noticed over the years that I've been reviewing theater is that my opinion versus the Tony nomination committee's opinions tend to be in totally different spectrums. I don't know if there's just an age gap or a cultural gap, but so when I think about what I think deserves to be nominated versus what I am pretty sure they're going to nominate, it can be two different schools at times. For me, the best play of the year was Thoughts of a Colored Man, Keenan Scott II's play. I thought it was wonderful. I thought it was inventive and really smart. And but the thing is, I don't think it's going to get nominated because not enough people saw it. It got closed down around the time of the fall COVID spike, and people just weren't going to the theater, and they never reopened, which is a tragedy because it really is the best play of the season. And I don't know if I don't think the Tonys are going to nominate it.
Yeah, I mean, I have to separate what I think how I think the Tony nominators are going to respond versus my responses, and I tend to believe that the shows that open later on in the season are the ones that are fresh in the minds of the nominators, where stuff that opens early on can be completely forgotten, or a show that's already closed.
Right.
I mean, a lot of the nominators are involved in the industry, and they realize that a Tony Award can propel a show at the box office for a certain amount of time after the awards ceremony. So they're looking into making sure that these shows that are currently running have a chance of extending or running through the summer and becoming, quote, a big hit, where some of the really good work didn't last or got shut down early because of COVID.
Yeah, this season's a very singular season because of that. there's a lot of stuff in the first half of the year that got shut down, and it's a tragedy because there were some really good shows out there that just never got the attention they deserved. Like Passover, I think, was a great play. Again, Thoughts of a Colored Man, Trouble in Mind, and Clyde's. I think Clyde's will probably get a nomination, and maybe Trouble in Mind. But I think when it comes to the first half of the season, the Lehman trilogy, I think, is really going to take the lead when it comes to nominations. It got a lot of nominations for the Outer Critics and I think the Drama Desk also. So I think that's going to be the show to beat this year.
And what about on the in terms of musicals?
It's been a really disappointing year for musicals for me. Really, I think there's only two that I've seen in which I felt like, wow, these were really great musicals, and that was Six and A Strange Loop. I love the concept of Six. I hate shows in which the cast members are holding microphones. It's like I am the minority who never liked Spring Awakening, but Six, the way it works with being a concert presentation of the Six Wives of Henry VIII, and how it is told, it works. And plus, it's very energetic, and the actors were committed to it. The design of it was kind of a fantasy almost, and I really enjoyed it. I thought Six was a wonderful show, and A Strange Loop is almost a bookend for me for Thoughts of a Colored Man. Just that you had the play early in the season and you had this musical at the end of the season, both which start under a similar premise of being shows that represent the inner thought process of African-American male characters. It's just that the Thoughts of a Colored Man, which is a broad canvas, I think, of Black men in general. Thoughts of a Strange Loop is a microcosm of it. It's taking one person and seeing what goes through his mind as throughout the musical, and both of them are very moving shows. And I think a Strange Loop, unless Mr. Saturday Night blows me away, I think A Strange Loop is the musical to beat.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Saturday Night tried out in the Berkshires before it went to New York, and it's a very slick show, very well produced. But I think people are going to like that most for Billy Crystal's performance.
Right.
It is a great performance in material that's okay. There were a lot of great performances in New York this year, in plays and musicals, some standouts. But from the little that I've seen and more of what I've read, I'm flummoxed. I'm not sure what's going to be nominated, let alone what's going to win, because it is a very unique season on so many levels.
Yeah. In regards to musicals, for actor, I think Jaquel Spivey's a lock. I think he's got it. He's got for me. No one has. There's just not a performance out there that is as complex and carries so much emotional depth as his playing Usher in A Strange Loop. If I was the one person who had any say and all say, he would be the pick for the Tony this season. Women, that's another question. I don't think women in musicals have gotten the amount of credit that at least in regards to range and ability and being given work that they could really shine in. Maybe Caroline or Change, which I wasn't really impressed with as a show overall. But the actress who plays Caroline there was, her name's escapes me at the moment.
Yeah, Sharon Clark.
Sharon Clark. Yeah, she was wonderful and kind of the shining star of that show. I just wish the show as a whole was better.
Yeah. I was very disappointed in Funny Girl. I went the other day and I thought, why are you doing a musical with a lead trying to take on the role that Barbara Streisand created, who can't sing? She charming as a comedian and everything, but that show demanded somebody who could put over those songs, and it just didn't work for me.
Absolutely. I mean, her voice was I thought was okay. It wasn't the big brassy, owning the theater kind of voice that Barbara has, or that some of the other greats have had. The Bernadette Peters or Patti LuPone kind of voices that have, once they're on stage, they control the stage. It's their house, it's their show. Anything that happens over the next 2.5 hours, 3 hours is only what they allow to happen. And unfortunately, Beanie never really owns the stage in that way. And it's disappointing because I love Funny Girl. I think it's a wonderful show. And it's one of those shows that should have the gravitas of something like Mame or Hello Dolly.
Yeah, I mean, I think the show itself is wonderful and so significantly different than the film. And some of the production numbers were great. The guy who played Eddie, Jared Grimes, his tap dancing was just incredible. But where you wanted it to
runner for featured actor in the musical,
where you wanted it to be strong and to be really thrilling, it wasn't. It was competent at that, but not. There were no chills and excitement.
No.
So we don't have Tony Awards per se in our regional theater, although you're a member of the Connecticut Theater Critics and I'm a member of the Berkshire Theater Critics. As our seasons are starting to come to an end up here, are there some milestone shows that you've covered this year that have made a difference for you?
In Connecticut? Excuse me, I wasn't expecting this question. Hold on a sec. Now I've got to go to my list of shows and take a quick glance at them. I have, unfortunately, certain prejudices when it comes to what shows I like and what shows I don't. I think, but when it comes to Connecticut shows, there have been a few recently that have been really good. Westport Country Playhouse's production of Next to Normal I really enjoyed. Hartford Stage's production of Blossom Yonkers I thought was really good.
I loved it. I loved it. I mean, it was, to me, the best thing I saw at Hartford Stage all year.
Right. I mean, probably the best thing I've seen from them since Quixote Nuevo a few years back. I'm actually really looking for. I just had an interview with John Leguizamo, which will be featured in the Journal Inquirer in a few weeks just before opening. But I'm really looking forward to their new musical, Kiss My Aztec, which he has written, and so that hopefully that'll be a good show. Really. One thing to remember, though, is that a lot of the Connecticut stuff came out in the midst of total chaos and not knowing what they could do and could not do, and being able to negotiate with the Actors Equity and putting on different productions and how it's like. I was going to have lunch with Jen Cody, who is the new female actress in TheaterWorks Hartford's Christmas on the Rocks, and then and then found out that she couldn't leave her her hotel room because of the guidelines that they had. They had to stay quarantined between going to the theater and going to their hotel room. It's been a rough year for them. I think when it comes to one theater, Playhouse on Park did a great production of Five Guys Named Mo, which I liked. There was, scrolling through here.
One of the ones that had a big impact on me was This Bitter Earth at TheaterWorks, which I found to be a fascinating play and very well done. As a standout, and from earlier in the year, well, actually last summer, their production of Walden on the Connecticut River.
Yes,
because of the production was really intriguing.
That was a remarkable production, and I would love to see theaters take risks like that. And TheaterWorks Hartford did it, and they knocked it out of the park. It was the most innovative thing I've seen anywhere in a long time. It was live. It was out in the wild, and the house that was there was real. I actually got a tour of the building, and it's got all the running water, and it really feels like a real place. And then you've got the garden out there outside of it. It was Rob Ruggiero took some real risks with TheaterWorks throughout the pandemic, and he and his staff really deserve some commendation for everything they did in order to make theater accessible to people in the middle of this crazy season.
I'd agree, and they had their pulse on what people would be interested in seeing.
Yes.
Which I found, I give them all the credit. Also, I think that Barrington Stage and Berkshire Theater Group and the Berkshires performed throughout the pandemic, whether they were outside under a tent. They did a production of a one-person play called Harry Clark in a parking lot under a tent. Separating people, socially distancing people. And then they were able to move back into their theaters. And even though they kept rows vacant and all of that, they never stopped performing. And I give them so much credit for that.
Long Wharf did a production of The Chinese Lady, which is, there's an off-Broadway production that's nominated for
right. It started at Barrington's. It started at Barrington's Stage.
Right.
Yeah.
The production at Long Wharf was gorgeous. It was beautiful. The two cast members were incredible. I loved the show so much. It's one of the best shows of the year. Let's see if I can pull it up here. Because it was incredible. I really loved it. There we go. Shannon Teo, she plays Afong Moy in that show. She was wonderful. And John Norman Schneider, who played Atong, he was fantastic too. Long Wharf did a really great job, and that's, for me, maybe the best play of the year, between that and Walden here in Connecticut.
What are some of the things that you're anticipating over the course of the summer, because things are back to full tilt? How many shows a week do you cover summertime, and what are some of the things that really are on your radar?
Well, I will tell you. I think for me, as I said earlier, Kiss My Aztec is the show that I'm really looking forward to, and let's see, Goodspeed's got a production of Cabaret and 42nd Street coming up this season. I'm looking forward to their season. They've got a new production of Anne of Green Gables. So Goodspeed's got an exciting season coming forward. I'm curious about the Kite Runner on Broadway and where that's going.
Yeah, I don't know much about it, except I saw an ad in the playbill for it. So it's something I would consider.
Let's see. let's see, Ivoryton Playhouse, who did a new musical this year called Star of Freedom, which was problematic in the sense that it opened like a week before Paradise Square, and they have a lot of similar themes about Irish and African American relations during the Civil War period. And so one was set in 5 Points, and one was set, and Star of Freedom is set. Paradise Square is set in 5 Points, New York, and Star of Freedom is set in the South and then moves west. The two shows, it's like, to be perfectly honest, Paradise Square I was a little disappointed with, and Star of Freedom I musically liked and conceptually liked, but the book needed a lot of work. But I think Star of Freedom was a good show at Ivoryton, and at least musically and conceptually. There's two productions of The Great Gatsby coming forward, which I'm curious about. That Ivoryton, one is Ivoryton and one is Legacy Theater. It's a new it's a new equity house in Branford, Connecticut. They just did a production of I Do, which I loathed, which I try not to be too hard on shows, but that one I just did not like at all.
How many shows do you review during the course of a week?
Depends on the week. April, I was killing myself literally from working. I've got a full-time job during the day, and then I've got to commute to New York and see a show and come back to Connecticut to do a job, which was exhausting. And in April, I saw 20 shows in the course of a month and commuting back and forth. Otherwise, in a normal period, I may see 2 to 3 shows a week. It's like June's going to come around, and I think I've only got 4 shows scheduled for June, so I actually get to take some time off and relax and focus on a separate project that I'm working on, which I'm writing I guess this is kind of an announcement. I've been greenlit to write a book on New England equity houses. And so I'm going to be spending time reaching out to New England theaters and hopefully traveling to some of them and writing a travel book about all the theaters in New England.
I would be excited about something. First of all, I'd want to read it. But second of all, to some of these theaters, at least the ones that I cover, have such charms to them, or the towns they're in are so charming. For example, I love going to Goodspeed because it's such a beautiful place, and to walk on the wharf there, right, on the river, or to watch that swing bridge move before a show, which of course has nothing to do with what's happening in the theater, but it's an outing and it's fun. And to me, going up to the Berkshire Theater Group is such a gorgeous theater in Stockbridge, or Barrington Stage in downtown Pittsfield has charm. So I'm envious of the fact that you're going to be getting to go during the summer to some of these gorgeous little towns and hamlets where they have professional theaters.
Yeah, I'm excited by it. There's most of them are in Massachusetts and Connecticut, but I'm really curious about the little houses the little theaters that are up in Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. There's not many up there, but it'll make nice little trips to go see what those towns are like and what those theaters are like. Yeah, you've got the venerable houses like Westport and Goodspeed and American Repertory, the ones that have been around a long time and produced lots of shows that have moved on to bigger and better things. But yeah, it's the little houses that I'm really curious about.
Yeah, and I mean, we are probably 30 years too late to the period of time when the New York theaters shut down during the summer, and all these famous actors would take their shows on the road and do summer stock, and you had tent theaters all over New England, which no longer really exists.
Right, and I've already written my chapter on. Granted, the chapters are really chapters because I'm only given about 300 pages to write here, and there's over 100 theaters to cover. So I'm only given about 2 to 3 pages of text and photos per theater, which isn't much. But Westport Country Playhouse, they were telling me about how that's what they did is that New York actors and producers would come up to Connecticut and produce a show and just to test run it, and then they would actually take a show and work, or 12 shows, and collaborate with 12 other theaters around the region, and they would rotate the show. Each house would have a different show, and they would rotate weekly. And you can imagine the chaos that would entail of a production picking up from one theater, moving to another, setting down, and having the actors perform there. And it's like a national tour, but it's regional, and it's all 12 theaters collaborating together. It was a wild concept, and I can't believe they actually pulled it off for a few years.
But they did, because people went to the theater back then, and you had your actors, and you got named people. There was a tent theater in West Springfield, Massachusetts called Starton, which had major stars. I mean, Judy Garland played there, and they would take a show, and it would run through their circuit of 12 or 14 theaters up and down the, New England, the Eastern Seaboard, each town a different week. And they could attract the talent because the theaters on Broadway weren't air conditioned. And these people spent their days in the country and really liked it.
Yeah. And still, we get a few theaters that are able to bring in celebrity performers from time to time. It's like Goodspeed's able to do it. Hartford Stage does it regularly. TheaterWorks Hartford's able to get some big names in. Ivoryton used to. You can go into Ivoryton Playhouse, see all the headshots of all the celebrities lined up in there.
Or this summer, they're at the Bushnell for the very first time. A pre-Broadway is, well, I shouldn't say the first time because they've had other pre-Broadway things, but a brand new comedy with Harriet Harris and Jeremy Jordan called something Killing a Playwright. I can't remember the exact title, but it's going to do a 2-week tryout at the building at the Bushnell on its way to New York. That's unique for Hartford.
Yeah, definitely unique for the Bushnell, who's generally a touring house. It's like, that like going back to the day when the Schubert in New Haven was the tryout house for Rodgers and Hammerstein. And all their shows were tried out at the Schubert in New Haven before they went to New York. It's like those big houses don't really get the opportunity to do that anymore.
That's for sure. We're out of time, Tim, but I want to thank you for joining us. And maybe towards the end of the summer, when you've written this book, we can preview it on the air.
We'll see how that goes. I have a deadline to write it by November, which I hope I can do. And then it won't actually be released for another year. So we'll see. I wouldn't mind actually coming back once the Tony Awards are announced, but if there's a slot, I wouldn't mind coming back and discussing the actual nominations.
Well, maybe we'll have a chance to do that. And, I hope we can. Anyway, I want to thank you for joining me this morning. It's always great to have you here on Artsbeat. Thank you so much.
And POTUS, got to say POTUS, which that's my review that's coming out in about 30 minutes.
Okay, so one you can find it on YouTube. One Man's Opinion is the place to go to read Tim's stuff and see his blog. It's really kind of fun, and they're always good listens.
Right.
Thanks for joining us, Tim Leininger, this morning, and that wraps up an Artsbeat. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. I'm Mark Auerbach. If you missed a part of today's program, want to catch it again, share it with your friends. It's archived on WSKB's Community Radio's YouTube page. We'll see you next Friday with another all-new edition of Artsbeat.
On the list of the things that I will not miss, first of all is noise.
List of the things
that I will not miss is peace and quiet. I would like to try it. Different people look at life from different points of view. If you really want the things I have, just help yourself. I give it all to you. On the list of the things that I will not miss, I would mention crowds. On the list of the things that I will not miss is open spaces. Why can't we change places? Different people look at life from different points of view. If you really want the things I have, just help yourself. I give it all to you. On the list of the things that I will not miss, I would mention work.
On the list of the things that I will not miss is contemplation.
Sounds like a great vacation. Different people look at life from different points of view. If you really want the things I have, just help yourself. I give it all to you. Different people look at life from different points of view. If you really want the things I have, just help yourself. I give it all to you. On the list of the things that I will not miss, most of all is rain.
On the list of the things that I will not miss is too much sunshine.
Can there be too much sunshine? Different people look at life from different points of view. Different people look at life from different points of view. If you really want the things I have, just help